Hi all, Rob here from Way Out West, freshly back from another fabulous Echuca Winter Blues Festival. Before I went away, I had a talk with Checkerboard Lounge's Carl Pannuzzo. The band will be at Way Out West, the Yarraville Club, this Sunday, August the 2nd, from 2 p.m. We had a great chat about the band, its history, how they got to record recently at Sun Studios. This is going to be another fabulous gig. A wealth of fantastic musicians playing with this band. Hope to see you on Sunday. Please hit that like and subscribe button. It really does help me out. And as always, rock on, my friends.
Yeah.
So, Carl, can you tell us a little bit about your early life? Where did you grow up, and was music a big part of family life?
It actually wasn't. My dad was a musician before he got married, and he, knew Australians, and his father said, "Nah, get a proper job and all that sort of
Yeah.
shit," right? But when he kind of saw that I had the bug from really as a baby, I just loved the record player, and like when I could reach the piano, I just sort of tag away at it. And he thought, oh, I'll let him go. He's just a kid. But basically, ended up I didn't want to do anything else. My sisters had a few records that basically, Dad used to just bring a few records back from garage sales and stuff and just chuck them at me because he knew I'd listen to anything. And insofar as that, there was a lot of music, but there really no one else really played music, put records on. No one listened to the radio. So I just kind of was in my own little toyland, if you will. And then, sort of early teens, I was getting a bit sick of the radio, what was on offer generally, and scanned the radio stations and found PBS and Triple R, and I think I was off from then, you know.
Sensational. I'm going to come back to PBS later.
Yeah.
So what first drew you to be a percussionist or playing drums? Because you did mention piano there at one stage. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there was a piano in the house. One of my sisters had played guitar, but she stopped that when she grew nails. It was just freaking ridiculous. I thought, well, there are classical guitarists that play with nails. Anyway, but I used to play with the girl next door. It was about my age, and her older brother I knew was a drummer, and but I never saw him drum, never heard him, never spoke to him really. But as I was saying goodbye one day, he came out and said, "Oh, I'm going to start teaching drums," and I ran home. I was like, "Mom, I've got to learn the drums," So it's kind of crazy 13, 14-year-old, really. It was probably the thing that saved my teenagehood, to be honest. But yeah, it was beautiful. And I mean, I guess piano is a percussive instrument, and certainly a little bit, because I was self-taught, rhythm is a bit more mind over matter, if you will. It's a bit like the way we respond to music, nod your head or tap a foot or dance or whatever you're going to do. I felt, and some people have complimented me in a weird sort of way, saying, "Yeah, you play piano like a drummer and drums like a piano player." I was like, "Yeah, okay, I get that."
Thank you. What about any drummers that might have really inspired you? Because I know you're a drummer and a vocalist. And I would guess that's pretty hard. There's been a few good ones like Levon Helm,
Of
Phil
course, yeah,
Collins,
yeah,
Don
yeah,
Henley.
yeah. Well, the thing is, I think it was a bit more common, in the 60s and 70s, your Buddy Miles, Karen Carpenter, whoever else, there's lots of singing drummers. I never really thought about it, I guess because I didn't really have the chance. Because when we started playing music at school, when I met a few musicians, the piano player was a singer, and he left the band, and everyone else just said, "Well, we don't sing, you better sing." And I guess I just didn't think twice about it. But that's how I started singing, because of course I did have those other role models around, and so why was it different to playing it? It didn't occur to me that it could be anything different. It was a lot of fun, and of course it's once you learn something in the same mode, like I was just getting used to singing and I was just getting used to playing drums, it sort of becomes part of the same machinery. Even though now I recognise drums are a bit more like driving a car. You're not really consciously going, okay, clutch, second gear, indicator. You just do that stuff after a while because it's repetitive. Of course, the creative part of drums means that you can't just rely on repetitive nature to, sort of get you through. But yeah, it was cool. And then but singing was just a bit of fun, and just threw my hat in it. And of course, once I started, getting more into blues and jazz and stuff, I just and soul, it's like that's actually really fun to sing, that stuff. Just really getting your curl on a bit.
Yeah, I guess also Ringo Starr did a bit of that too, didn't he? Playing
Yeah,
and
that's right.
singing.
Again, it was sort of pretty normalized back in those days. It didn't
Yeah.
didn't seem too different. I found one time I tried to play bass and sing. That was hard. I thought
Ah,
I thought that's actually really hard. Because somehow you can strum a guitar and sing a thing and play piano, but bass is it's kind of a whole nother thing. So my hat's really usually off to singing bass players.
yeah,
Actually,
well, so Jack Bruce was a champion of that, wasn't
yeah,
he?
yeah, that's right.
You did
Yeah.
mention a couple of genres there. Do you have a favorite? Is it blues, soul, or you
Look,
cross quite a few spectrums?
yeah, what I think I realize is that it's probably more about African American music.
Mm.
So whether it comes out as one of the many types of jazz there are, or again one of the many types of blues there are, whether it's from Delta up to hard rock blues, soul again sort of has a few iterations over its lifetime.
Mm.
What they call R&B now, of course, is not R&B as Louis Jordan might have had it.
Mm.
Um, you know, um, and I don't really love modern R&B. It's a bit tossy for me,
Mm.
but generally, I think anything steeped in black culture. It seemed like I like the expression, I like the movement of sound, I like the vibes, the feels. There seemed to be, you know, you watch someone like Purdy do incredible shuffle, and it's all feel, it's all sound. And so then you get someone like Steve Gadd who takes that same feel and idea and throws a bit more flash on it. Although he's not that flash, it's all about the feel. And what I notice, especially as a white person doing black music, is you've got to attend to the feel. If it doesn't feel like the sort of thing you remember moving you when you were listening to it, from an old American artist, then that's then it's probably not going to work.
Mm.
It might be okay,
Mm.
but it might not really make you go,
Mm.
I think that's the thing. You want to pull a stank face or something because something made you go, yeah, right, that. Yeah.
I hear what you're saying about modern R&B when I was working with the bank, and some of the young girls are coming and saying, "Oh, I've been listening to R&B," and I go, "That's not R&B. That is not it.
Well,
That is not it."
yeah, they needed to get another name for that, didn't they?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to turn my
No,
phone
you're
off.
right.
Yeah.
Before we start talking about the sensational Checkerboard Lounge, um, what are some of the other artists you performed and toured with?
Um, Look, I still do a little bit with Fred Smith, who's a singer-songwriter from Canberra. He's actually a diplomat by trade, and he gets stationed in a lot of crazy places like Afghanistan and Papua New Guinea and all this stuff. But he writes a killer song,
Mm.
and I play drums and piano for him when he comes down to Melbourne. He's got a sort of band in every state now, and sometimes he'll ask me for a festival interstate and whatever. But he's a really interesting cat, a really super excellent musician. I think he was on Australian Story once. People kind of know a bit who he is, and he's a great storyteller. And of course, sometimes stories of war and death are pretty harrowing, but he's also gifted, as a lot of the folk traditions, as it were, by being a bit funny.
Yeah.
So I can sort of, so that's something I've done. I've usually sort of done a few solo albums over the years, and every now and then I'll put a band together just to launch it and
Yeah.
not push that too far because I write a lot of music, more than just in a blues style. But I love Checkerboard so much, and as a band to play with and have an experience of playing live, I kind of that's the one I just couldn't not keep going. So
Yeah.
things have come and gone over the years. But yeah.
Yeah, talking about Checkerboard Lounge, when did the band form? And I've been reading up a little bit. There's been a lot of people go through that band. It's not just like
Yeah,
the people that we have now. When did
yeah,
it
that's right.
form? And you had a long residency too at one of the pubs too, didn't you?
That's right. The Great Britain Hotel was where most people probably remember us from. Like, we still get someone coming up just about every gig saying, "Oh, we used to come and sit on the floor in the '90s and watch that and get really stoned and stuff." So um, there was a good 7 year residency there that a lot of people remember, and mostly because I think we improvised a lot. We sort of came in and out of blues, if you were. Sometimes it got a bit psychedelic. Sometimes sets would go up for up to an hour without a stop, just jamming, really. We used to fantasize about being a support act for the Grateful Dead, in the time, because it was that sort of vibe. And there's still a little bit of that element that lives spirit-wise, I guess, in the band, because we do love to change it up and improvise a lot. But when we first, it was in high school that we started. Really, it was basically, Dan Kerr, the guitarist who plays with a lot of ska bands these days. He came back from an Eric Clapton concert the night before to our regular Saturday morning jam and said, "We've got to be a blues band." It was just like he'd seen the light, and it was like, "Sure, fine, no problem, I love it." And so pretty much started in school. And then after we left school, we put out for a harmonica player because we wanted a harp player, and Ian Collard answered the call. And I think he hadn't done that much prior to that, so it was kind of the first place where he really got to develop and explore a lot of stuff, I think. And he's an incredible improviser, as well as, he's a great traditionalist now. Like, he really knows how to make it count in that way. And so he's sort of, again, crossed the gamut of all things. But as you do as a musician, you develop. And so over the years, we would have different, like Tim Neal, who still plays with us now, he was with us for a time in the '90s, and Mick O'Connor was there. So we always had a sort of changeable fourth. Garrett Costigan on the pedal steel is a different element again to a Hammond organ. But again, sort of long sounds that you can get to sort of break things up a bit. And so, so many different lineup changes. Sad case of Max Meredith, Dave Max Meredith, who died some years ago, in an accident. But he really sort of solidified the nature of the band, as it were, which was that sort of jam band aspect. And so now you've got someone like Shannon Bourne, who's been with us nearly 20 years now, and who started amazing. Like, if you ever saw him with Chris Wilson back in the day, and he was never not amazing, right? But he just seemed to develop so much more of his own voice and his command of instrument and music that he can, again, go. If we do a gig with Bob Settergreen, which we've done a couple of in the last couple of years, Shannon can bring out the jazz, no problem. And you almost didn't see it coming, But so really, really, really fun. Lots of great players that we've been playing with.
Yeah, we'll come back to Shannon shortly, but you mentioned Reverend Mick O'Connor, because he played with the early Jeff Atchison and the Soul Diggers.
That's
And I'm
right.
old enough to go way, way back to the 70s, remember the
That's
famous
right.
Reverend Mick O'Connor.
That's right. And the Spot the Aussie and all of that,
Yeah.
like all the great bands. Yeah, Mick was there. He was the first time we ever saw a live gig was sitting in front of Mick's, Hendrix fronted Hammond there at a bar in the middle of nowhere of Toorak. I just won a prize on PBS to go out and see Tinsley Waterhouse Band. And we were the only people there. There was one guy at the bar at the entrance, and we were the only people up the front. The place was completely empty, and we were 14 years old. And one of our parents dropped us off, and the other was going to pick us up. And we were just first live music we'd ever seen. Our heads were completely blown off because the whole band was just killing. And Tinsley came up to us in the break and said, "You boys look like you like your music." It's like, "Oh yeah, this is the best." And he said, "You look a bit young to be in here." And it's like, "Oh, don't tell anyone. Yeah, we're underage, but we really want to stay. Don't kick us out." And he said, "No, I'm fine with it." He said, "The thing is, you won't get into many places being underage. But I tell you what, when I'm not playing a gig, my wife Barb and I, we go out to gigs. Ask your parents if they're not into going out and taking you out. We'll chaperone you and get you into all these, And so for the next 2 years, Tins took us out to so many incredible gigs. That's where I first saw Bob Settergreen, for example. all that stuff, Dutch tildes,
Yeah,
it was all happening.
yeah,
And so, yeah, it was such a great lesson and a great experience to learn.
yeah.
Melbourne being such a great place for music generally, there's so much of it. We loved it.
Yeah, Tinsley Waterhouse should have been up there. Well, it is with us, but
Yeah.
everyone should know that. I remember having an incredible time at the Central Club seeing that band. It was my wife. We just started going out, and I told all these people we're going to go and see Tinsley Waterhouse, and we went out there, and I was so drunk I actually fell asleep in the gutter, and so everyone remembers Tinsley Waterhouse because I fell asleep in the gutter.
That's so funny. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
God!
No,
Now
he was a great performer. Yeah.
in 2020, you guys won the MBAS Blues Challenge and
Yeah.
went to represent Australia over in Memphis at the Blues
Yeah.
International Challenge. How was that experience? And I don't want to seem out of line, but you're not what they would expect as a traditional blues band over there, Checkerboard Lounge.
Well, interestingly, we'd been in the MBAS comp for a year previous, and we sort of turned up with a Ray Charles cover, and we did one original, and it was again, you're right, it was not the sort of thing that we would usually do, but when we realised it would behove us to write a few more original songs. Because I'd always been a bit shy of writing original. I'd always written, but I'd been a bit shy of bringing them out because I thought, it's not going to be as good as some old Elmore James tune, is it? Right? It can't do those things, yeah. So the greats had already been written as far as I was concerned, but I thought, look, okay, if that's the sort of thing that they're after, we'll make it a bit more in that style, and which we did, and it really did work that time, and we got to semi-finals there, which was great. I think it was sort of something like 40th out of 240 bands that were there. I don't know how they table it or anything, but it was really cool. But we actually, again, it's one of those things where Shannon's a polymath of a mind, but he can pull out a very very meaningful blues, and ultimately that's the same with Tim. Tim Neal's that's mostly his gig. He's mostly been blues and gospel, he can do a bit of jazz as well, and so the only reason we like to change things up is because it keeps us entertained, and a lot of audience really kind of like the idea of at one point we'll just give you a straight blues, and at another point we're going to turn right left there, and that gets a bit exciting, to be able to see more than once. Or, unless you're a real fan of a band, most people, we're so spoilt for choice in Melbourne. You can go and see a bunch of heaps of great different stuff, right? But we find a lot of people coming back because they both like the feel, but they know that they're going to get something different out of music as well. So sort of both camps will be satisfied, and that's a bit what we learnt, how to sort of make that balance a bit better in the course of doing that Memphis thing. And yeah, they really liked us. It was good fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, 2020 was a pretty harrowing time, what happened with COVID, but you guys did get into Sun Studios and record an album
That's right.
before all the shit hit the fan. How did that all come about?
Well, interestingly, that came about because we were going to hang around for a couple of weeks. We had an old Hammond player called Dave Boyle who used to play with us in the 90s, who now had a studio in Texas, in Austin, Texas, called Church House Studios. And we'd arranged to record with him, but he was booked until mid-Feb. So we were going to just hang around and, see a bit of Louisiana and do what we were going to do, have a bit of a travel. But by the time the festival had finished, we realised, this was starting to come up and we might not make it home if we stayed that long. Meanwhile, Shannon and Tim went to the Sun Museum, as it was thought as a museum. And when they let Tim on Jerry Lee Lewis's piano at the end there, and he pricked up the ears of the guy and said, "Man, okay, you really know what you're doing. This is still an operating recording studio, Got 5 hours left on Monday." And so they came home and said, "Right, we're recording at Sun." I went, "Oh, fantastic. That solves everything and will be fun." And of course, the spirit in the place is ridiculous. It's incredible. It's not just all the old gear that's still there, but that sense of, there's a lot of music that's gone into these old crusty walls,
Yeah,
and
yeah, oh, yeah.
It was a
Yeah,
great experience. Of
yeah.
course, the big downfall of everything being that, usually after going to something like International Blues Challenge
Mm.
and making a record like that, you'd have been able to sort of have a good couple of years worth of gigs, but of course that couldn't happen because everything was just shut down pretty
Mm.
much until the end of 21 properly. I
Mm.
think 21 I've never booked so many gigs that never happened,
Mm.
because
Mm.
even though we thought we were open, it kept sort of opening and shutting and people getting sick and
You wrote about Sun Studios. I've been there a couple of times, and I'm not a musician, but you stand in that room and you think the people that have stood in this room and
yeah,
played in this room, it's just unbelievable.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
sends a shiver down your spine.
that's right.
Um, I was going to ask because I've been reading, I got all Pauline Bailey's books, so I did a little bit of research, and I was actually going to ask you about winning the PBS thing and that, but we've covered all that.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm also was interested to read that you're a bit of an introvert, and you do, and I've noticed that you do play a lot with your eyes closed. It's how do you get on stage when you've got that that introvert side of you?
It's interesting. It's a good question. What I notice is that, well, part of the reason I'm closing my eyes is just want to get into the sound and the music a little bit deeper without getting so distracted by things that I see. Plus, my eyes aren't great anyway, and they get a bit confused. They sort of span my brain around a little bit to the point where if there's ever flashing lights, like I'm not epileptic, but I lose my lyric center. Like songs I've sung forever, it's just I don't know that second verse. It's just gone. If anyone's just flashing lights, it's weird. But I think interestingly, it's kind of a known transaction. You have a job to do. You're on the stage. You've got to fulfill this thing. You've got other people you're working with, so you've got to be, cooperating and responsible with that. But the audience also understand the transaction. They've signed up for it. They've turned up. They're going to get this thing. You've turned up. You've got to give this thing. We've got creative freedom to do it the way we might like it, or the other side of it, we'll take requests or play what people, if they ask for something, if we can, we'll do it, no problem. Uh, but that's as far as the interaction really goes. Like I learnt after COVID, actually, it was a very interesting sort of recognition to realize the first couple of gigs back that it wasn't really just about me enjoying myself playing music and hoping that people would like it. It was actually really, we are doing a service. People like myself, I love going to gigs. We want music. We want to feel vibration through the air that's coming out of those four sounds or whatever and get excited about the interplay. So I realized that actually I have more of a job than just playing the music. There was a communicator element. So I sort of learnt to go, okay, it is a safe place. The world isn't so big and scary, as most creators are sort of sensitive for some reason or other, that it manifests differently for different people. But yeah, I recognise that while the transaction is still there and it's clear enough, I could be a bit braver. So I think I'm, sort of growing up a bit more in that way now.
Cool. Oh, yeah. Again, in the Pauline Bailey's book, and one of the residencies, you said you guys were into a big jam and you had your eyes closed and you opened them up and you could see the audience was all the same. They were just in that moment. That must have
Yeah.
been incredible when you get that feedback.
Yeah. I remember that moment so clearly. There was just, a couple of people, standing in front of Ian Collard just pashing, and everyone else had their eyes closed and were dancing and just the whole room was gone. And I
Mm.
remembered thinking, just shut your eyes, go back
Mm.
and don't break this moment. Don't
Yeah.
be the only one who, exposes it, as it
Yeah.
were, because it
Yeah.
felt like everyone was really on a vibe. And I mean, when it's right and the sound's good, a good boogie can do it. You just feel like you're
Yeah.
on this train, and it's so good, you don't want to get off.
Mm.
And when a whole crowd is experiencing that, and we've had a lot of those experiences, it really does make it so much more compound than just your own love of music. It's a fascinating point of culture, I guess, and community. Yeah.
Yeah, without wanting to sound corny, it can be it's quite a religious experience without having to be religious.
Oh, music definitely is because it moves the spirit, you know, it's an invisible force.
Mm.
So whatever religions, institutionalized religions try to, I mean, though honestly, if I were brought up in a Baptist church, I'd be a believer, no problem. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean that mostly because of the music though, right? And they use it to amplify that sense of fervor that, you know, a good preacher will be able to do. You know, we come from a lot of English stock, you know, it's not a terribly expressive culture.
mm,
So, you know, most other white religions are pretty dry.
mm,
But they all try to access a sense of something bigger than us, you know.
mm,
And for me, music's absolutely it, you know. Whether I'm in an audience witnessing other people's music or partaking in my own music or just a jam, whatever, you know, it's definitely something
yeah,
you've got to be in a really bad funk
yeah.
for it not to lift you out of it,
Oh,
you know.
yeah. I remember we'd seen the first time I seen Solomon Burke at Byron Bay. I mean,
Awesome.
that was just, I still get the hairs down when I'm just thinking about seeing
Yeah.
Solomon Burke run that service for us. It was unbelievable. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. We got to see Al Green in his church over
Ah,
in Memphis as well. That was killer because again, it was. I mean, he was just all over it, and it was full of music, and the band were incredible. You know, like some of the best musicians we'd seen the whole week. You know, and there were some good musicians around, of course. You know, but these guys just sort of had it in their bones. It
yeah.
was just they breathed the stuff. You know,
Yeah. The,
it's
yeah.
too good.
The Tabernacle, yeah, I've been there a couple of times, once with Brian Wise. And
Yeah,
Al Green had just come back from Byron Bay, he toured
yeah,
Byron Bay. And
yeah.
here he is, he's up there doing it. And we're all up the back. There's about 20 Aussies. And he looked and he goes, "Where you're from?" Someone said Australia. He goes, "The Aussies are in the house." It was
That's brilliant.
now back to the gig, which is Sunday, August the 2nd at Yarraville Club, 2 p.m. We're so looking forward to it. We
Yeah.
spoke about Shannon and Tim briefly, but there's a bass player too. Do you want to let us know about your
Yep,
bass player?
Zoe. Yeah, Zoe Frater she's been with us about 5 years now. Um, and yeah, she's just a killer monster musician. Like just she's another soloist, you know. It's funny, the last album we just kept asking her to do solos in the songs, and it ended up four of the tracks had bass solos, which I don't think has ever happened on a blues record before. But she's so good. And she's a great feel and all sorts of music. She writes her own music as well, but it's a bit more in the kind of, I call it friendly zapper. You
Uh,
know, it's
yeah.
it's kind of crazy and out there, but yeah, but not too hairy.
Mm, mm,
Um, yeah, and she's just a great cat.
mm,
And just is really good at listening and feeling what's going on and being able to jump on this and that. All the stuff that we love to do, to be able to sort of have this compound experience of music rather than just one player you're listening to. It
yeah.
might be, say, spearheaded by a solo like Shannon, but everyone's in it, and that's what I think I love so much about the band. And she really fit the mold. It happened because maybe 10 years ago, it was the only time I'd lost my voice. I couldn't speak. I don't know what happened, and so I had a gig at the Loman with Checkerboard, and called a bunch of friends and said, "Come and sing a song with us." Some other vocalist mates, and I'd asked Adrian um, Perger, who's a trumpet player singer as well, plays keyboards too, and and then Amos didn't show up for the gig. Amos Sheehan, our bass player of a long-standing many years, great bass player, and we was like 20 minutes before the gig, and we rang him, and he said, "Oh." He'd spaced it, and he was an hour and a half away. I thought, "Oh Jesus, what are we going to do?" And I thought, "Oh, I wish Zoe was here." And I walked in to the dining room, and she just walked in, having come out from work because she's partners with Adrian. And I went, "Ah, Zoe, you don't happen to have an axe in your car?" And she said, "Yeah, I do." And I said, "Would you mind, like at least the first set until Amos gets here?" And she said, "No problem." And
Yeah.
she got up, and with no rehearsal, of course, and she's just jammed everything just perfectly and sweet. It was as though she'd been with us for years. So when Amos left, then a few years later, we thought of a few bass players, and we thought, let's try Zoe first because that just worked so nicely.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
seen you guys. Oh, actually, it was last year's Byron Bay, and it was the last show we seen on the last night, and
yeah.
everyone was tired, but it was the highlight of the festival for the group of people that I was with. We
Oh,
were all tired, wanting to go home, but no one could go home until Checkerboard Lounge finished. It was fantastic in that little tent thing or whatever it was. So, what does a Checkerboard Lounge set list look like?
Um, kind of like a half originals, half covers. Probably, it's always nice to throw in songs that people know. They're always fun to play. They, kind of feel good. Sometimes we, depending on the vibe of the room, if it looks like people are up for a dance already, we'll start up. But a lot of the time we sort of start, low and down. Get an old Otis Rush tune out or something like that. Um, and just get the feel in, get the vibes in, and make sure our sound's all right. And it usually ends up with some dancing at some point, because we like that vibe too, and people love a dance. And just like it is, blues just liberates you, whether you're listening to it or moving to it, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, and things from the recordings we've made, and most of the recording stuff is original, but there's again a couple of covers
Yeah.
on the
It's
albums and stuff.
great. Shannon and Tim have been coming away out west since we started 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And because I always love introducing the band, and I always love introducing Shannon via Chris Wilson. Now here's Shannon Bourne on the electrical guitar. I love
Yeah,
it.
that's the way you did it. Yeah, yeah.
That's
We
about
miss
yeah,
Chris.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Tim Neal's not only such a great keyboard player, but he's a great saxophone player as well.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. He was kind of almost going to go down the sax route when he went to uni, but and he still plays, and he's got a great new horn too. So hopefully he'll bring it along because he has been lately. He's been, bringing it on a few songs, and it's always great. Yeah,
Yeah.
another
Well,
element.
all right, mate. That's all I've got. I really do appreciate you spending some time with us. We'll get this put up, and we're looking forward to August the 2nd to seeing you at our new venue, the Yarraville Club. You should love it there. Huge stage, big sound.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a good new venue.
All right. Thanks, Rob. Looking
Thanks,
forward.
Carl. See you, man.